Tasha Monroe had spent years building a life that looked steady from the outside and felt threadbare within. In Magnolia City, she kept a small apartment clean, stretched each paycheck from her junior designer role at Indigo Creative, and poured whatever was left of her energy into raising her daughter, Nia. She had also supported her longtime boyfriend, Darnell Price, through a PhD, one bill, one night of overtime, and one act of self-denial at a time. She believed, because people told her to believe it, that sacrifice would deliver security. On the morning that was supposed to end years of waiting, Darnell called to say that work had seized him again and he couldn't show up at City Hall to register their marriage. Tasha steadied her voice for Nia's sake and said the delay was only temporary. It took only minutes for that reassurance to split open when a woman named Keisha arrived uninvited, announced she was carrying Darnell's son, and mocked Tasha's face, clothes, and station as if humiliation were sport. Keisha said Darnell planned to marry her instead and sneered that Tasha's push to get paperwork done was nothing more than a scheme to secure a household registration for her little girl. For Tasha, the moment felt like stepping off a curb and discovering the street had turned into a river. Everything she had done, frugality, long shifts, the patient forgiveness she kept extending, looked suddenly like a story someone else had tricked her into telling. The choice that followed did not arrive draped in romance. Malik Carter, a man Tasha barely knew, stepped into the breach with an offer that sounded like a contract more than a vow. He said his elders were pressuring him to marry, she needed legal standing so Nia could get registered and start at Sweetgrass Academy. If they registered immediately, he would help secure Nia's documents. If they wished to part ways later, he would cooperate with a divorce without a fight. He said plainly that his heart already belonged to someone else. Tasha took a breath made up of equal parts love for her daughter and exhaustion from being cornered by life. For Nia's future, she agreed. They walked out of City Hall with an official certificate and an agreement, a cooperative marriage, boundaries intact, and a shared plan to register Nia and visit Malik's grandmother, May Carter, to complete the illusion of a fast union. Privately, Malik ended his assistant's efforts to arrange a merger marriage with a prominent family. He told Andre Hill, the quiet, precise man who managed Malik's calendar and stopped problems before they crossed thresholds, to inform the Sun and Davenport elders that the Carter heir had already married. At the same time, Malik ordered something else to continue. The long, quiet search for a woman he believed had saved his life 6 years earlier, a woman he was certain he could identify only by the missing half of a moon-tier jade pendant. That night still lived inside his bones as torn fabric and the scent of sweetgrass oil, as a breath in the dark that had steadied him, as a warmth that had disappeared by morning. The girl had left with half of a pendant, he had kept the other half and a vow that he would someday return it. On the other side of the city, Darnell's mother turned the living room into a strategy room and called betrayal a difference of opinion. Lola Price reminded her son that the child, Nia, carried their name in the neighborhood's eyes and must be secured through custody once Darnell's job stabilized. She lectured him about ambition, about appearances, about not letting a woman take what's yours. When Darnell blurted that Nia wasn't his child, the confession fell into the room like a dropped plate. Lola recovered first. She asked the kind of question that revealed a chasm between being a mother and being a manager of outcomes. If the girl was not his, why fight for her at all? Darnell filled in a squalid story. Years earlier, desperate for tuition, he had drugged Tasha at a hotel for a client who wanted someone clean. The plan collapsed when a drunk man stumbled into the wrong room and found Tasha first. She had become pregnant immediately. Darnell had lied that the baby was his because, without the lie, who would keep working to pay for his schooling, their apartment, the car he felt a man should have, and the life he was owed? Lola did not gasp or scold. She told him to coax Tasha into adding his name to the title of any new place she bought and, when the deed was recorded, to walk away without the burden of custody. What Darnell and Lola did not know that day was that Tasha stood in the hallway long enough to hear the truth and shape herself around it. She walked into the room with a face trained to show cooperation. She said she intended to sell the apartment, use the money to buy into a top school district, and, she paused here to let trust build, add Darnell's name to the new deed so everything would look right. He smiled at her with gratitude he had not earned. She pressed her lips together and did not tell him that the buyer waiting behind the scenes was not a man easily manipulated. The Carter Group, through a front, bought the apartment at a fair market price. Malik told Tasha to move when she was ready, to keep the card he offered in case of emergencies, and to trust that he meant to shield her and Nia from ricochets. She refused the card. She didn't refuse because she didn't need help, but because she needed to see herself act under her own power again. On the day Darnell showed up to seize the sale proceeds and throw her out in the same motion, Malik arrived in the doorway and changed the weather. He fired Darnell from the role he was angling for in a Carter supplier, told the Price family directly that harassment would end or they would be finished in Magnolia City, and radiated the kind of authority that made people recalibrate their sense of their own size. Nia watched with the bright, unconcealed awe only a child can carry. Tasha was old enough to feel two currents at once, the relief of having someone finally stand between her family and harm, and the stubborn commitment to keep the boundary of a cooperative marriage as a protective rule. She thanked him. She went on with her errands. She made dinner and checked school forms and tried not to think too long about why Malik's nearness felt familiar. Small acts became the threads of a slow-growing fabric. Malik insisted Tasha and Nia move into a Carter family property, on loan, he said, until she found a place in the school district she wanted. And Tasha said no until she could not find any argument sturdier than old pride, then said yes for Nia's safety. At a dealership, a 6th customer anniversary giveaway awarded her $1 million car. Tasha, who did not believe in pies falling from the sky, declined twice until she confirmed that the owner's surname was Carter. Only then did she accept and tell herself it was luck with a Carter shadow rather than a Carter gift. She brought Malik a lunchbox to say thank you. He said he didn't need it. Later, his butler joked softly that the tomatoes Malik always swore he hated had disappeared from the container. When a light in Tasha's rented kitchen flickered and died at midnight, Malik arrived with a toolbox he had not held in years, climbed the stool as though he belonged there, and twisted the base until the faulty contact gave up and glowed. When Tasha rolled her ankle hurrying downstairs, he lifted her like a habit he couldn't remember learning. The undertone in those moments, the scent of sweetgrass on Tasha's skin, the shape of the scar on her calf from childhood scalding, the way Nia leaned into his side as if a magnet tugged her, told Malik a secret he still would not say aloud. Grandma May welcomed them into the Carter house with the clarity of someone who knows what she wants. She looked at Nia and said the child had Malik's eyes even if no one else could see it yet. She pressed a red envelope into Tasha's palm and stacked bank papers and small jewelry boxes on the coffee table like laying out a future. Tasha tried to decline. Malik, who had prepared a gentle fiction to protect every boundary at once, told his grandmother with a boy's grin that she sometimes imagined the family was richer than it was. May laughed and tipped her head and watched the lie mash against the truth. The old lady gave up only what Tasha found least burdensome to accept and kept the rest, not because she had changed her mind about Tasha, but because she understood how new trust grows, in increments, with room to breathe, and without keeping score. Outside the house, Malik kept working the search that lived under every other task. A clerk at Gullah Gems on Sweetgrass Row told Andre that a woman had redeemed a moon-tier pendant half a few days earlier. Surveillance footage, borrowed from a shop next door because the gem store kept none, showed a slim woman with careful hands who looked very much like Tasha. When Malik asked Tasha later why she had been in that neighborhood, she said she had sold a bracelet to raise money for the move. He did not call her a liar. He bought a coffee he didn't want and tasted the memory of geraniums at the back of his tongue and told himself that certainty had to be earned slowly when the heart at stake belonged to someone who had learned the hard way that certainty can be a con. Pressure from the city's other powerful families did not bring the Carters closer to any alliance. The Davenports pressed their niece, Chantel, toward Malik with a familiar playbook: sit at the head of the table as if the seat were yours, talk about what our families can do for the city, and smile as if patience were proof of goodness. Malik told them the Carter Group did not need a marriage to justify its projects and did not entertain pre-written futures. Chantel did not hear no, she heard a delay to be managed. She found a way to install herself as acting president at Indigo Creative through an acquisition the Carter Group had indeed made to rescue a struggling but talented team. She arrived at Tasha's office as if floating, reintroduced herself as a long-lost childhood friend from Cypress Parish, and set about buying loyalty with gifts. She noticed the pendant half Tasha still wore on a plain chain, cooed about how lovely it was, and offered to take it to a master who could restore the missing half. Tasha's fingers tightened over the little moon, and then she did something she would later regret. She entrusted the keepsake to the wrong hands. Even as that small piece of Tasha's past left her neck, life gave her reasons to lean forward. She and Malik took Nia to the city registration hall. A clerk asked why the father line on the form was blank when a man stood beside them who looked very much like one. Tasha, who had made a rule of telling the truth even when it hurt, said she did not know the biological father's name. Nia turned her small face up with such open hope that Malik felt something tilt inside him and told Tasha to write his name for now. The pen scratched. The form turned into a file. Paper turned into a pocket of safety for a child. At Sweetgrass Academy, the better-than-everyone Benton family called Nia fatherless, and a teacher named Ms. Lawson protected donors so efficiently that compassion became a casualty. During a parent-child race called Rescue the Princess, Nia begged Malik with a look, and he ran as if a finish line could change what a child hears at recess. When he and Tasha reached the end, the game required a kiss to free the princess. He brushed his lips to Tasha's cheek in the most public act he had performed for the smallest possible reason, and Nia, crowned with paper triumph, danced. Ms. Lawson demanded kneeling and apology and threatened expulsion. The tone of the courtyard changed only when someone whispered what Lawson had failed to notice. The quiet man she had tried to humiliate was the CEO of Carter Group. Malik publicly severed Carter Benton business deals, banned Lawson from teaching, and announced that Carter money would never again prop up any institution that taught children to kneel before wealth. He bent to Nia's ear, asked her not to tell her mother who he was just yet, and watched the child promise secrecy as if secrecy were a new kind of game. Chantel tightened her net. In the office, she weaponized order against Tasha's department through a groping supervisor named Mr. Banks, asked for loyalty while arranging traps, and set up a department dinner she knew would end in a hotel room. Malik arrived in time to end it. Jealousy flared in Chantel so hot it scorched her judgment. She planted a 300 million red diamond engagement ring, the very one Malik intended to use to mark a new chapter, inside Tasha's desk and staged its discovery. Security stormed in. Accusation curled through the open office. Malik reached the doorway in time to stop the handcuffs. He asked Chantel where she had gotten the ring and why her words about a past she could not possibly know didn't line up with the details he carried like scars. She repeated her Cypress Parish origin story and lifted her dress just high enough to show a calf scar in a place where his memory insisted there should be another. He said nothing. He had learned to let lies overreach and topple themselves. For a brief stretch, another, older story attempted to rewrite the present. Isaiah Carter, Malik's older brother, arrived with a paternity test in hand and claimed Nia was his daughter. The test, notarized and stamped, gave the claim teeth it did not deserve. Isaiah explained that the night 6 years earlier had been a haze of whiskey and missing hours at the Magnolia Crown Hotel. He argued that, if Malik did not love Tasha, then Isaiah could make a family where Malik refused to lay down roots. The claim sank hooks into old sibling bruises and pulled up Malik's self-doubt. His rare RHAB blood type matched Nia's. His mind kept throwing up flickers of a hallway and a hotel keycard and a geranium-scented breath, and yet a lab result in Isaiah's hand tried to make all of that an error of memory. Chantel, calculating quickly, bribed Darnell for details in a parking lot and learned what mattered most. A drunk Mr. Carter had stumbled into Tasha's room that night, and Darnell had lied to claim the baby afterward. Chantel tucked that revelation away. It was too powerful to use openly and too dangerous to leave on the table. She decided to do what she did best, stall, smear, and string hope along until it obeyed her. The next blow did not come with paperwork, it came as metal. A car roared through a crosswalk and aimed squarely for Tasha and Nia, sent them spinning to the street, and vanished down a side road. Malik's security team followed call logs to Vivian Davenport, Chantel's aunt, and connected the attack to threats Vivian had made earlier. At the hospital, Nia needed an emergency transfusion. Malik rolled up his sleeve, and a pediatrician barked a warning that most people never have to hear. Children with rare blood types can suffer dangerous reactions when transfused by close relatives. The nurse found a match from banked units. Nia stabilized. The doctor's admonition hung in the room like a swing that had not stopped moving. Meanwhile, Chantel ran a secret hair test and learned what Malik's heart already knew. The result matched a parent-child relationship between Malik and Nia. Panic and denial fought inside Chantel. She had built an entire future on a lie and now faced a truth that would sweep her to the city's edge. Andre did for Malik what loyal lieutenants do. He brought hard memory to a soft, confusing moment. 6 years earlier, he said, he had left Malik in the care of a hotel staffer after too many drinks in Isaiah's private suite, then doubled back when he realized Malik had slipped away. Malik returned the next morning with missing buttons and a cufflink in his pocket he could not account for. The timeline fit. The pendant half, the scent of sweetgrass oil, the scar placed exactly where his hands had brushed, it all fit. Malik asked Isaiah to meet with Tasha present. Isaiah confessed he had forged the paternity test, justified it with talk of protection and opportunity and doing what was best, and then watched his words crumble under the weight of Nia's near miss in the transfusion bay. He apologized to Nia first, quietly, with flowers and the awkwardness of admitting to a child that adults sometimes make mistakes so big that sorry looks small beside them. He apologized to Malik afterward and stood back while the family adjusted to a truth that had finally decided to stop hiding. Meanwhile, Grandma May kept her own counsel. She had met Tasha and Nia and needed no test to tell her what her eyes had known the first afternoon, some likenesses you don't need math to prove. She had also heard rumors that Malik was divorcing and remarrying a Davenport, and she had bristled so fiercely that the house staff avoided her for 2 days. When Malik finally told her the whole of it, the fake marriage, the cooperative plan that had turned into a home, the pendant chase, the child who wasn't supposed to be his and was, she thumped her cane on the floor and ordered practicalities. She said to stop living like a secret, to fix the records that needed fixing, and to give a proper wedding so no one with a microphone could call their family a performance. Tasha agreed, not because Grandma May had demanded it, but because the path behind her and the path ahead of her had finally met and insisted on being one road. Darnell and Lola had been forced to repay what they had siphoned through lies, including the way Darnell had slipped his name onto a deed he didn't earn. Keisha had evaporated from the city's rumor map when the Carter legal team put her name in filings. Sweetgrass Academy had posted a new code that forbade humiliating children for poverty and stripped Ms. Lawson's credential. Indigo Creative had ousted Mr. Banks and placed a fair manager in his seat. The Davenport gates had closed, and a quiet line in the business pages reported that Vivian faced charges connected to the hit and run. Every thread that had knotted Tasha's life into humiliation and danger had been snipped or tied off. What remained were the ordinary, necessary knots that hold a family together. Some healing still asked for ceremony. Tasha, Malik, and Nia drove to Cypress Parish to visit the cemetery where Tasha's mother rested. The road narrowed into a canopy of trees, and the air took on the clean, grassy sweetness that had followed Tasha since childhood. She told Nia about sweetgrass oil and about being a little girl whose mother had braided it behind her ears and pressed a cool pendant to her throat before school. Malik knelt and cleaned the headstone like he was touching a parent's shoulder. He promised, out loud, but without theatrics, that he would protect Tasha and Nia for the rest of his life. Tasha allowed herself to speak a truth she had kept hidden from even herself. In the years since Nia's birth, she had dreamed of a faceless man whose arms felt like home. She had dismissed the dream as fear's trick. Now she could name the man and no longer needed the dream. Back in Magnolia City, life developed a new routine. Malik drove Nia to school, and Tasha watched from the door as Nia gave him the kind of urgent instructions only 5-year-olds deliver, confidence blooming in her chest because a big person she trusted sat behind the wheel. Grandma May taught Nia to play chess on a board that had belonged to Malik's grandfather, laughed at every improbable move, and cheated once on purpose so Nia could discover the joy of catching an elder in a trick. On Saturdays, the three of them walked past the park where a local master, Mr. Goins, set up a board and invited strangers to break his puzzles for a prize. Tasha broke one with a move she explained as if she were showing someone how to fold a paper crane. Mr. Goins offered a stack of bills and his phone number. Tasha refused both, not because she thought herself above need, but because she wanted to teach Nia a lesson that would matter more than money. That there are some things you don't take because taking them makes you a person you don't want to be. The story still contained moments that pricked raw places. Malik, who had held so tight to competence for so long that letting go felt like failure, drank too much one evening and showed up at Tasha's door with truths that would have been better delivered sober. Tasha placed a glass of water by his hand, watched him sleep on the sofa like a man who hadn't slept in weeks, and made a decision in the morning that held tenderness and firmness in equal measure. She told him, in the steady, narrative way of a person who has stopped performing, that a new life is built with choices made wide awake. She said she intended to keep their boundaries clear until their paperwork and their words matched each other. He understood. He put the ring back in the box and waited for the day the ring would be the echo of a life already built rather than a promise trying to force the future to hurry. Chantal made one last attempt to drag the story back into her hands. She used her post at Indigo to set Tasha up for a public shaming with a planted theft and then staged a scene where she hoped to label Tasha a mistress. Tasha answered without yelling and with more power than shouting could carry. She reminded the room that a mistress is a person who steps over a legal wife to claim a husband. She still carried the marriage certificate with Malik's name beside hers. If anyone in the room wore that label, it wasn't the woman who had been dragged there in handcuffs. The sentence did not fix Chantal, but it did fix the room. People who had been ready to laugh at Tasha's humiliation remembered how to measure behavior against a line that wasn't money. Malik arrived, dismissed every accusation, and ordered security to escort Chantal out. He severed the Carter-Davenport ties in a press release and added a clear sentence: fraud is not a business strategy. It would have been easy to end the story there and declare the rest a montage of joy, but families, especially newly formed ones, earn their peace in smaller arcs. Nia spiked another fever. The pediatrician muttered again about RHAB and careful matching. Isaiah showed up at the hospital with flowers and the kind of apology that looks a little like a man learning how to be a brother instead of a rival. He told Nia that uncles cry sometimes and did not try to hide that his eyes were wet. In the corridor, he told Malik that guilt was a lousy hobby and that he intended to put it down. Malik believed him. Back in the room, Grandmame pressed another red envelope into Tasha's hand and told her she had known Nia was a Carter the first day because some truths do not need a lab to prove them. The divorce cooling-off period, once a looming line on a calendar, passed without a trip to the clerk's window. On a bright afternoon when Magnolia City smelled faintly of magnolia and cut grass, Tasha and Malik stood with Nia between them at the registry office. The clerk, who recognized the Carter name but had learned not to perform recognition in front of rich people, handed them forms and asked for signatures with the same tone she used for a plumber and a teacher the hour before. Tasha signed. Malik signed. Nia, who could not sign anything official yet, squeezed their hands. Outside, Carter security blended in with tourists. Tasha held the small red booklet and felt the odd sensation of holding something that symbolized what already existed, instead of a hope fragile enough to be crushed by a missed phone call. Grandmame insisted on a ceremony for family, not for the city. Indigo staff drifted in pairs and whispered about how love looks when it is not a press release. Sweetgrass teachers arrived with new policy binders and quiet apologies. Andre stood to the side and watched like a man who had just finished a long project and was pleased with the blueprint's fidelity to the build. The ring Chantal had tried to use for humiliation found its rightful home without speeches about price. The moontear pendant halves were rejoined by a master who treated the seam with the reverence of a healed scar. Malik lifted the chain and rested the pendant against Tasha's skin, where it had belonged the whole time. Nia walked down the path with a basket of petals and the solemn seriousness of someone who understood that scattering beauty is a job, not a game. She announced to anyone who would listen that she was the prettiest flower girl Magnolia City had ever seen. Malik agreed until Tasha gave him a look that asked him to correct the record for the sake of tradition. He corrected it, exaggerated his shame, and made the gathered aunties laugh. After the ceremony, routine returned not as drudgery but as a rhythm. Tasha took on projects at Indigo that challenged her in ways that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with art. Malik dealt with vendors and permits and the ordinary corruption of city contracts with a patience that comes only after you have fought a bigger war and won it. Nia learned to tie her shoes with a method Grandma May declared superior to every other, and then told everyone at Sweetgrass that Grandma May's way was the official way. The Benton family, who once taught their child to point at the poor and sneer, stood on the playground edge and learned the quiet vocabulary of contrition, silence, watching, not repeating the harm. Ms. Lawson's replacement taught a unit on kindness that included a line every child recited: "You can be rich and wrong or poor and right, and neither money nor poverty sets the rule." The line lodged in Nia's heart in the same place where the promise not to kneel had taken root. When Tasha thought about her life before Magnolia City's weather changed, she did not put a villain's face at the center. She placed a map in her mind and marked 3 points. The first was the small apartment where she had believed that giving more of herself would eventually return a dividend called safety. The second was a crosswalk where she had been knocked to the ground and stood up holding a child and a truth, that safety is never given by people who use you and always built by people who stand beside you. The third was a garden where a pendant seam was invisible because a master had taught it how to be whole again. On that map, the lines between the points did not look straight. They twisted around corners, went through rooms where men lied, passed through offices where women pretended to be friends while stealing what they wanted, and crossed neighborhoods where little girls learned too early to be ashamed. The lines also went through a kitchen where a man with too much power stood on a stool to fix a light because a woman he loved could not reach, and through a hospital where a grandmother placed a red envelope into a palm not to buy anything but to bless what was already there. In the years that followed, when Magnolia City mentioned the Carter wedding, the article often began with a photograph of a pendant and a caption that made the jewelry sound like a fairy tale. The truth sat in the spaces between those words: an ordinary woman, a child, and a man whose money could not fix the one thing he wanted until he learned to be brave without it. The city forgot the Davenports as cities always forget those who build themselves on other people's pain. Indigo Creative sent out portfolios with Tasha's name on the masthead. Sweetgrass Academy sent a newsletter that highlighted a new scholarship fund and showed Nia, now missing 2 front teeth, holding a ribbon with a line printed on it about dignity. The Carter Group built a park on a block that had wanted green for 20 years. The plaque didn't carry Malik's face. It carried Grandma May's favorite instruction: take care of your own and the neighbors you are lucky enough to have. On quiet nights, Tasha would sometimes touch the pendant and feel for the seam. She could never find it by sight. Only her fingertips could locate the place where 2 halves met and refused to let go. She would think then of how the city had tried to teach her that being whole was a thing you either were or were not, something you carried or dropped. The pendant argued for a better idea, that wholeness can be made, that mending is its own kind of beauty, and that what holds becomes stronger at the place it once broke. When she watched Malik tuck Nia into bed and then step into the kitchen to clean a pan because he had burned the rice again, when she watched Nia boss him with joy and not fear, when she heard Grandma May tell the same story for the 5th time because repetition is how love keeps itself alive, she understood that the promise she and Malik had made to keep the peace for a child's sake had become a vow to each other. It was no longer a performance for paperwork. It was the arrangement of a life. If anyone asked Tasha years later what changed everything, she didn't mention the car or the ring or the lawsuit. She said it was the day she walked into her own hallway and heard the truth about a past lie, and decided not to bargain with humiliation anymore. She said it was the moment she took an offer that sounded like a transaction and made it a home by how she behaved inside it. She said it was the morning she stood at a clerk's counter with a child on her hip and wrote a name that turned a blank into a belonging. She said it was the afternoon she stopped believing that waiting and forgiving and working would conjure a decent man out of a selfish one. Then she smiled and said it was something smaller and stranger than all of that, The smell of sweetgrass oil that a boy had remembered because the body remembers the things that will matter when the mind is still deciding. For Malik, the answer came easier. He said it was the kiss he put on a woman's cheek because a little girl needed to win a game, and how the kiss turned out to be the exact measure of what he could promise, a public tenderness that gained nothing and proved everything. He said it was the way Tasha refused money when she needed it, because some kinds of help come with a hook you cannot see until it snags your heart. He said it was how Nia told him to park straight and hold her hand and be on time, and how obeying her made him better at every other part of his life. He said it was the old scar on Tasha's calf where hot water had once kissed her and where his hand had landed without thinking, as if memory had tugged him into place. And if anyone asked Nia, who grew into a girl who still liked paper crowns and also liked correcting boys at recess when they said things that weren't true, she said the best part was that her parents didn't fight and didn't leave. She said the second best part was that she could smell sweetgrass every time her mother braided her hair. She said the third best was the pendant because it looked like the moon and felt like a secret. Then she ran away to play because the business of being a child, even in a city that insists on being dramatic, is mostly joy when the grown-ups do their jobs. The story's last image is simple. It is not the ceremony, though that was lovely. It is not the newspaper shot of magnolia blossoms over brick. It is a table where 3 people eat without rushing, where a grandmother tells a story she has told before, where a pendant glints against a collarbone as if pleased to be home. The camera would pan to the light in the kitchen that no longer flickers, and then to the front door, where coats hang in sizes that tell the truth about who lives there. If the camera could smell, it would find sweetgrass and dish soap and the faint heat of something baking. If it could hear the city outside, it would hear traffic and a neighbor's laugh and the soft closing of a gate that no longer needs to be checked twice. Hey besties, thanks so much for sticking around till the end. If you felt something, learned something, or just enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, drop a comment, and hit that subscribe button. See you next time, bye.